evening, everybody, and welcome. Hello, Danielle. How are you doing?
Hi. Really good. Thanks. Having a lovely day.
It's a bit hot, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really humid. But we're never satisfied, are we? It's either raining or it's too hot.
I love it when it's hot, but when there's air conditioning, and we don't have air conditioning in the UK, really.
No, fans.
I know. So I've got my windows wide open, and I live in London, so there might be a bit of background noise with people, the busy street and stuff. So sorry if that happens, but my microphone is quite good, so hopefully we'll be all right. But we are talking today about the biggest donors to Scientology's ideal org strategy in the UK. Somebody leaked me an internal promotional email, I think it was, that showed all of the people who had donated at least $100,000 to the Ideal Org program in the UK. And of course, I published it and tried to get as much information as I can on all of those people because there's a public interest. Now, a bit of background, Ideal Org, what the hell is that? Scientology, Dave Miscavige they've been buying up buildings all over the place. There's one near you. There's Gateshead, is this new building they purchased 16 years ago and that has sat there empty, derelict. They pay millions of pounds for these buildings and then just try and raise the money to refurbish them and open them as these lush new ideal organizations. So there are different things that you can donate to in Scientology. There's the International Association of Scientologists. There's obviously donating to Scientology for courses and books and stuff. And then there's the Ideal Org program. So these people are not just donating to this, they're donating in other places too. Which is important to note because there's no way you get away with just donating to one thing, right? So what I thought we would do is share my screen. I have shared a lot of this information on Scientologybusiness.com. Before we do that, let me say hello. Hans Christian Swartz is in the house. Good evening. Claire Bear saying hello. We've got Andy Two Arms, woohoo, in the chair and ready to watch. And SP Crusader Leanie G. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining. So let's just go through this list because we both know people on this list and see what we find out. So the first one is David and Becky Fryer, quadruple humanitarian, which means they've donated $400,000 to the Ideal Org program. Do you know David and Becky Fryer at all?
No, I don't. I don't know them. They're a lovely looking couple.
Well, Becky, her father actually made a bit of a storm during the Anonymous movement about 15, 16 years ago because her father wasn't happy that Becky had become a Scientologist after getting engaged to David. And he was trying to get her out. And there's videos on YouTube, actually. I'm going to be doing a reaction video to one of them soon. She was declared a potential trouble source and her family were trying to get her out. Obviously they were unsuccessful because now they're married, have kids and have donated a bunch of money, so that's quite sad, but they're Manchester All Public. First on the list, obviously we've got Bob Duggan and his wife Trish Duggan, who we know are huge multi-millionaires over in the States that donate to all of these things. What do you know about these two people, Danielle? Anything?
Well, I just know that they're whales, aren't they? I've never met them, don't know them, but I've obviously been aware over the years that they give a hell of a lot of money.
Yeah, and they give a lot of money to everything, not just Ideal Orgs. They donate to the IES, they donate to Scientology. They're called whales in Scientology. They're the big donors that Dave Miscavige can rely on for financing Scientology's activities. Similar to Jim and Gigi Bridgeforth, Jim is in business with Tom Cummins, who is another big Scientology whale over in the States. I don't know how often these guys spend time in the UK, but they just have a lot of money, so that's why they're on this list.
I'm guessing there's some sort of incentive to them to give this money, right? There's some sort of tax benefit.
Well, this is the question. Like, they'll get a nice pin and they'll get a certificate and maybe a trophy, I'm sure. But the taxing is such an interesting question because Scientology isn't tax exempt in the UK. It's not considered a charity here. So my question really is, where is this money going? Is it going to COSRECI, which is the Church of Scientology Religious Education College Incorporated, which is the UK corporate arm of Scientology, in which case you don't get the tax benefits because it's not a UK charity. Or is it going to the IES but being put in a separate pot or something? I don't know.
No.
But they be pressured to give the money. It's not like there's no strings attached.
Yeah, I mean, if you were to put yourselves in their shoes, say I was a donor and I was going to give £200,000, I would be wanting to see where that money went and how it's being spent. So I find I'm puzzled by them believing everything for face value. I mean, what are they? I'd be asking questions, wouldn't you?
Yeah, especially after such a long period of time, because London Org opened as I did in 2006. Birmingham Org opened, I think it was 2014. And there hasn't been a new Ideal Org in the UK since then, apart from a few little things like St. Hill. They refurbished the Quoll building, and there's a few little bits here and there. But Sunderland, which is the Gateshead building, Manchester, Plymouth, those buildings were purchased almost 20 years ago, and they're just sat there empty. So I'm sure they have questions.
Yeah, and it's just puzzling to me. It really is.
Yeah, without a doubt. Talking of puzzling, Lizzie and Mauro Calcioli and Sheila Gaiman. This is two families that you and I both know very well. Danielle, what can you tell us about the Gaimans?
Well, I'm actually very fond of them. I grew up with them as at St. Hill. They were public when I was in, and I was in the Sea Org. And then Claire joined the Sea Org. She was actually on the RPF with me when I was at St. Hill, as was Neil and Sheila. They were all on the RPF with me at the same time. And their dad was being put through what we call or what they call the A2E. So he'd been declared and had to work his way back again. In that time period, I had just left, and he needed a secretary and a housekeeper. So I went to work for him. And, I was really fond of David. I got on really well with him. And he taught me to write my first check.
Lizzie, well, of course he did. I'm sure.
Of course he did, yeah. And, I know a lot of people probably, there's some upset that they have with him because, and to a certain degree, I understand it, because we were in the Sea Org, and then he and people like Herbie Parkhouse and Kemba, my brain went for a sec, sorry, would come in and, with these sweeping statements like get rid of all your heaters, for example, and then go back to their own lovely homes. Do you know what I mean? So they had money, we didn't have money, that sort of thing. But when I left and was working for David, he taught me quite a lot, and just a bit about life, really, that I hadn't experienced in the Sea Org, including writing checks, etc. And one day I was at the sink in their house washing dishes, and Sheila came in from the RPF to handle him and to talk to him about his A2E, and was furious to find me in the house and kick me out. And David didn't come and apologize. I never heard from him again. She literally just kicked me out of the house. And a couple of weeks later, she called me, and I thought she was going to apologize. And she took me for coffee and tried to get me to come back in again and do my A2 and what. So, that was the experience then. But Claire ended up, I think she probably joined the CMO just as I was leaving. I was LRH Com based at Fellow UK at St Mary's down in Rottingdean, and Claire I'm pretty sure she had just joined the CMO, and then she married Tim after I'd left. And then I believe she's in Clearwater, isn't she? I'm not sure, but
last I heard, she was either there or in LA. I know it's over the States somewhere. Yeah. Obviously, David Gaiman was in charge. He was the head of Scientology in the UK for a while. He was the head honcho in the Guardian's office, right?
Well, he was in charge of the PR side of things, as far as I'm aware. Herbie Parkhouse was in charge of finance, and then Jane was the Guardian. Yeah.
And they have their own business, and this is how I know them. Sheila, it must be Sheila's daughter Lizzie, who is pictured here. We can see that's Lizzie Calcioli, because she married Mauro. And their children, were staff at London Org. So I know them
Ah.
really well through there, but they all work for G&G Vitamins, which is a supplement store down in East Grinstead. And they supply all of the orgs across the UK with the vitamins for the purification rundown that they use. But they're also staff members like Ali, Fabrizio, Emilio, were all staff at London Org. Oh, and Leo Calcioli, he was in charge of the Purif. And obviously, Ali Calcioli is fairly well known because he took the UK government to court and won in the Supreme Court to try and win, or he did win, the right to marry his wife, Louisa Hodkin, at London Org. And that's what saw British Scientology buildings being designated as places of worship, which doesn't give them tax exemption, but it allows them to conduct religious wedding ceremonies. And that's the whole Calcioli family. They're very well known in Scientology.
Yeah. I mean, they were kind of like, in those days, Scientology royalty, those the top guys in the Guardian's office, you know, everybody respected them, looked up to them. But, you know, they were smart. You know, David had some financial smarts going on. You know, he used to run the canteen at St. Hill, for example, with, you know, Sheila's sister Rhoda used to work there, and Jenny Parkhouse worked there. And yeah, I mean, did the money go back into St. Hill or did it go into their pockets? I don't know. It's a question worth asking. And they were very wealthy and always have been. David was good at making money. And yeah, there's a real disconnect between someone in the Sea Org who has nothing and then these very wealthy Scientologists, you know, who make a lot of decisions for, or did at the time, for the people in the Sea Org. So, you know, I can understand the upset.
And it carries on through to today. So, for example, the Calciolis are a huge whale family. They're big donors, so therefore they can get away with a bit more in Scientology because ultimately David Miscavige doesn't want to piss them off because they're getting money. However, they're also staff members, or they were when I was on staff. So
yeah, and also G&G has been going for years and years. I mean, it was going when I was in there, and you know, when the GPs that we used at St. Hill, who were Scientologists as well, would refer people to G&G to go and get their vitamins. And you know, the staff would go in there to buy their stuff too, or members of the public, should I say? Not many staff members could afford it, but and it's still going today.
Yeah, exactly. Let's move on. Stuart and Vicky Guy. Any stories about them?
Well, I don't know, and I'm in touch with a couple of the family, but I'm assuming that Stuart is the son of one of the Guy brothers, maybe Alistair, I'm not sure.
Murdo.
But it's something I can check.
Murdo.
Oh,
Stuart,
Murdo?
Yeah, Stuart is the brother of Murdo Guy.
Oh, is he? Okay, all right. So that Alistair is his father then, I think.
Right. Yeah, this is what I had an inside source talk to me who doesn't want to be named, but they said that I think that his mother still works at Happy, which is Scientology's Edinburgh branch.
She's a lovely lady. She's so lovely.
Is she?
I really like her. Yeah.
It says here, Stuart is in business with Rory McLeod, who we'll get to a bit later on. He's a couple people down on the list. But Stuart Guy is listed as a gold meritorious IAS donor, as well as a UK ideologue humanitarian. And that means he's also donated at least $1 million to the IAS alone. So this is in addition to the UK ideologue program.
I think what really puzzles me about this, and going through the list after another one lower down, when I was a child, these families were penniless.
And they probably still are. Like, this is the thing. There's one that we'll talk about a bit later on, but this is not like these people generally have buckets of cash laying around and they're just donating a little bit of their vast wealth. They are making money, and every penny they have will go towards Scientology in some form or another. So I would imagine they're quite cash poor, because I don't see a reg session in Scientology happening where they go, I've got £1 million in the bank,
No.
but I'm only going to donate 100,000. Scientology will try and get the whole million, and then you have nothing left. So then you have to work really hard to make another million, and then they'll take all of that as well. There's no conversation where Scientology will allow you to donate just a small portion of what's in your bank account. So they probably are quite poor, even though they have quite a large cash flow situation.
I will never forget, because I was on reception when I was still at school, but I never forget at weekends and holidays when I was on reception at St. Hill, that I was right next to the reg office and I could hear the regging going on. This is where they try and get the money for you to pay for courses, etc. And I do remember someone in tears because they wanted to go home and they were being pressured to pay money, and they were being pressured to remortgage their house, and they wouldn't let them leave. And I just find that criminal. You know, and I don't know whether it still goes on today. I don't know.
Well,
I have no idea, but I know what I saw and heard.
And that was way before I even joined Scientology, and that stuff was happening when I was in Scientology, and I'm sure it's still happening today. We have the Chase wave, for example, where Scientology were helping people apply for credit cards and, you know, loans and such, and playing the system. Any way they can get their hands on any bit of cash, they know how to do it, and they will do it.
And really making you feel guilty and feeling bad for not helping to mankind and to save the planet, you know.
Like, this is the sort of thing they would say. They would say, well, if you can get the money, why wouldn't you? Because this is going to help X amount of people, or this is going to help save the planet. So why wouldn't you? Like, they guilt trip you because you think, well, I don't really have an excuse to that. I just don't want to. Well, if you don't want to, why don't you want to help other people? That's because you're a dick. Like, that's the sort of conversation that would go on and I would have these conversations with people. Why wouldn't you come out book selling with us? You know that it helps. You know that it works. So why don't you want to help other people?
And how about this too? You know, exactly. How about this too, where you're pressurizing somebody to take out the max on their credit cards, and then they start to get into trouble because they can't pay their credit cards off. So they end up in ethics because they're bringing Scientology into disrepute because they can't afford to pay their credit cards.
Exactly.
And who got them there in the first place?
Exactly. But you can't say that, because if you were to say that in an ethics interview, you'd be in a lot of trouble.
And you pulled it in.
Yeah, it's your fault that Scientology made you go into debt. It's ridiculous.
It's so mad.
Richard and Melinda Bromley. Know anything about these two?
I know the surname Bromley. I knew somebody Bromley, but I don't think it was either of them, unless they may have been related. I think the person I remember, I think, was called Lindsay Bromley, I think.
I have no idea. I couldn't find any information about them, actually. But Andrew and Maria Robb, who are next on the list. Pete Griffiths, who is a former Scientologist here in the UK, told me that Andrew and Maria Robb have been in since the 1980s. They were in the Sea organization, but I'm not sure of the situation now. I met them at the Birmingham Morgue opening. They were chatty, which I found surprising. I was sent to him for punishment, and he had me move a huge pile of moldy books from one side of the castle basement to the other, whilst calling me a robot, needing instructions to operate at all. Clearly, they have landed on their feet, but I have no idea what they do. Those are the words of Pete Griffiths.
This is the other question, isn't it? How have they landed on their feet? Have they really, or is this just that they've remortgaged their house, or that they've sold something? You know, what is it? How are they really cash rich? Are they?
Yeah, or inheritance. There's a lot of older first and second gen Scientologists passing away now, so they are inheriting houses and things like this. And I'm sure all of that money's going straight to Scientology's pocket.
And what they do with their money, look, it's not our business what they do with it. What is our business is what Scientology does with their money.
And considering that they're not doing anything with the money, like Scientology is selling them a promise. If you donate to the Ideologue program, we will renovate Gateshead building and turn it into an Ideologue and help people. But they're not. They purchased the building 16 years ago. It sat there empty, it's in a state of disrepair, and they haven't raised enough money or even enough staff members to open it as an ideal organization. So they are just sitting on the cash. So yes, it's their choice to donate money wherever they see fit, but they're not donating it to a legitimate charity, and the people who they're donating to are lying to them. It's fraud.
I know. Yeah, absolutely.
The next one on the list is Rory and Sarah McLeod. Now,
No.
I know Rory I used to know him quite well. He was a staff member at the London Org on the foundation staff back then. I can't remember his post. I think he was director of training, or I might be completely wrong. But he was in the org quite a lot. Scottish guy, very nice man. But there's an article online actually where he learnt about property investments through YouTube videos. And somehow has done very well for himself. And it was reported a couple of years ago that he's now taking in £8 million a year from his property investment. So he's done incredibly well for himself. He's no longer on staff, but he showed up to the IES event in a fancy car and a big fancy watch and so on. Done well for himself, but obviously...
Did you see him?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he had a nice suit, he had a nice watch, and he walked in. But obviously the money he's making is going to Scientology, so he's done well for himself. But how much of that £8 million a year is going to the cult? Because I'd estimate a lot more than you would expect. Yeah.
And they won't be watching this, I expect. They won't be watching our videos.
Well, you never know. If you are watching, hi Rory, good to see you. Alrighty, let's carry on. We've got the Rorna Parcell family. Is that a name?
Now, I don't know the Rorna name, but the Parcell family, they've been ensconced in Scientology since forever. You know, Charlie Parcell, and I think a very well-known Scientology family.
What were they doing? What do you remember of them, if you remember anything?
Nev could probably tell you a bit more, but I know that they worked in the Guardian's office. On staff. They weren't in the Sea Org when I was there.
That, you know what, that's something that has changed, I think, over time, because I don't see any world in which they would hire a Scientologist in OSA without them being a member of staff or in the Sea organization. They use like OTs to do some of their dirty work. Like if there's a protest, they will get local OTs to go and film and harass us a little bit, but they wouldn't have someone working full time in a job without them signing a contract, I would imagine.
I think the majority of people who were working for Bureau 1 when I was in the GO were non-SEALG members.
Wow.
And you know how there are field staff members who go out and raise money, what have you? Similarly, they would have, for want of a better word, agents who would go out and do the dirty, like raiding people's bins, or even if companies had shredded stuff, they would literally get the shreddings and glue them together again. It would be really good to talk to somebody who used to work in B1, because the stuff they got up to was, I wonder how legal some of it, what they did was, you know.
Oh, I bet 100%. Annie Two Arms here is saying, just can't believe the sums of money these people are giving to this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maria de Jesus Gutierrez, welcome, says these stories from these women are horrifying. And Witness is saying, hi, Alex and Danielle. I think that was, hi, Witness. I think that was in reference to yourself and your story.
Oh, right. Okay.
So let's move on. We've got Alistair and Trisha Lyset. Now, that's interesting. I know them very well. In fact, I have stayed in their house. So Alistair and Trisha have two daughters, Steph and Hannah, who were both on staff at London Org when I was there. Hannah went over to Flag for the Golden Age of Tech Phase 2, and she was an auditor. And Steph, I can't remember her job post, but it was Div 6. It was something in Div 6. I seem to remember. She used to come out book selling with us quite regularly. And during the 2011 riots, I couldn't actually get home. We were out book selling on Edgware Road. And because the riots had gone over the train tracks, I wasn't able to get home. But I was able to get to East Grinstead because it's a different train line that goes a different way. So I went from book selling and went with Steph back to their house and stayed in their living room on their sofa. And I'll never forget it, because Alistair woke me up in the morning just by standing there and going, Alex, it's Wednesday. And I was like, what the fuck? What the hell? And I asked him about it. He said, yeah, it's all, it's a good way of waking someone up because you're starting the day with a stable datum. And I was like, okay. And I couldn't understand why I was really confused later on, because it was Thursday. All day I was really confused because he started the day telling me it's Wednesday and it wasn't.
Do you know, I've just remembered something on the flagship Apollo.
Yes.
And I must talk to Janice about this actually. If somebody was not on post on time and for roll call or whatever, and they were still asleep in their bunk, you would go down and you would I'm not sure if there was a flag order on this or not, but you have to put your hand on their chest and shake them awake. And if that didn't work, I was allowed to throw water on them if they wouldn't wake up, which I never did, but I would have been allowed to have done that.
Gosh, it's mad, isn't it?
But you're actually allowed to put your hands on them and to shake them awake. Yeah.
Wouldn't be allowed to do that these days, I can imagine.
No. Well, I don't know. In Scientology, maybe you would.
Well, probably in Scientology, yeah. But no, I think it's a shame because Alistair and Trisha, they were really lovely people, and their daughters Hannah and Steph are also really lovely. Alistair and Trisha are like big OTs. They're like definitely way up there on the bridge. They're donating a lot of money. They donated, I think it's like £100,000 to Narconon, the drug rehab centre in Sussex. But they are fully committed, and I don't see a world in which they come out. Steph and Hannah, I don't know. They're no longer on staff, the last that I heard. Maybe they will one day leave it once their parents are no longer with them, but they have such a strong family unit and they are all really lovely people. It really breaks my heart thinking that Hannah and Steph are still in, because I had really fond memories of going out book selling with them.
Yeah. And the thing is, these people are lovely people. They're just being duped. They're just not being told the truth,
And they don't know it. They think they're being sold a lie, and they think that they're being helped and they are helping other people. But just look at the facts. If you've donated $100,000 to the Ideal Org program, well, we've got London and Birmingham. Where's the rest of the money going? Jeff and Holly Parvin. Do you know them at all?
No.
So I have a little quote here. My inside source has told me Holly Parvin is the daughter of Tony and Sue Hollam, who are big-time UK field staff members. So that's what I found out, but I don't know them personally.
I mean, some of these people were born after I left,
Yeah, absolutely. Charles and Nicole Jackman, please tell me you remember Charles.
Nev does.
Charles Jackson, right? What a guy. Charles was a staff member, and I think he still is at London Org. He was on the foundation staff, and he was always posted at Tottenham Court Road, which is one of the book selling outlets, the test centre. And he used to come out book selling with us, handing out flyers and leaflets. And he's one of those guys that he's very quiet and reserved, and you would expect him to be very like middle class. But he has like a naughty, pesky side to him. And I'll never forget like his little cheeky laugh. This kind of guy that's much older than me, that he's just trying to get away with some stuff. But he was really, really lovely. And I actually bumped into him in Paris when we went to the Ideal Org opening in April. I was sat down with Pete Griffiths and a couple of others. Andy Two Arms, who's in the chat, was there. And I was being interviewed on camera at this cafe round the corner, and he walked past, and I was like, "Oh my God, hi Charles, how are you?" And he had no idea that I had been protesting, and he was like, and because I haven't seen him in years, he was like, "Oh my Alex, how the devil are you? How's it going?" And I was like, "Yeah, what did you think of the event?" He said, "It was good, wasn't it? What did you think?" I was like, "Yeah, it was great." And then someone whispered in his ear. Obviously, they recognized Pete Griffiths, who's a big-time SP, and he got whisked away. But for a moment there, we had a brief interaction, and you could see the confusion in his eyes when he was like, "No, I know Alex. He's not an SP."
Yeah,
but
so sad. Isn't it sad?
Yeah, very much so. And
Yeah.
also considering, like, he should be retired, right? I don't know how old he is, but he must be in his late 60s, early 70s by now. There are videos of him outside Tottenham Court Road 15 years ago. This guy should be in retirement and enjoying his life savings, not donating £100,000 or more to Scientology. But there we have it. Brenda McQuaid.
Well, obviously she was married to, was it Mark, is it Mark McQuaid? Martin?
Mark McQuaid, yes.
Mark McQuaid, yeah. And links to Greenfield School, right?
Yes, so Mark McQuaid is a teacher at Greenfields. And my inside source said, as far as I know, Brenda is heavily involved in the Effective Education Centre in East Grinstead.
Yeah, now when I was at school, I sometimes had to do something useful after school. I can't remember why it happened, but I went to work for the Effective Education Association, which was being run by Judy Guy at the time. And that was just up the road from my school. And I would spend a couple of hours after school helping children to read using study tech.
And it's got a little shop on the high street, haven't they?
Has it?
Yeah.
Oh.
It's opposite the pub. What's it called? The Ship, I think it's called.
Yeah.
Where the road splits. There's a
Yes.
Effective Education Centre there, and they provide like adult education lessons and classes and things using study tech. And it's closely linked to Greenfields.
Yeah, and they don't really publicize the fact that it's a Scientology kind of outfit.
No, exactly. But everybody knows in and around East Grinstead these days. Dan and Nat Garside.
Now,
Any stories?
This is interesting. Well, I'm wondering if Dan is the son of
Mike
Garside and Beryl.
Yes.
Okay, so Beryl and Mike used to work with me in the GO. Initially, they were members of the public. They weren't in the SEAL, but I'm guessing, I can't remember if they joined after I left or not. Before I left. But I really liked them. They were great fun. But yeah, Scientology has a way of changing people to become little mini Hitlers sometimes.
Yeah. Well, my inside source tells me that Mike was a reg for the Flag office, which meant his job was to sell courses at Flag to people here in the UK and try and get them to go over and get services there. I don't know if that is still the case, but it certainly was.
And he was really helpful. A member of my family had a breakdown. They were non-Scientologists, and my mother brought them to St. Hill to have some auditing and counselling, and they did help him, and it was Mike who helped him. But yeah, that didn't last. He left, soon after. But Beryl and I used to work, quite closely together.
That's the mindset of a Scientologist, though, is that if someone's going through difficulty, this is the only thing that will help them. So it's not like, they would have pitched Scientology because they want to hurt or abuse your family member. They genuinely wanted to help and felt that it could help. But unfortunately, obviously, it didn't. They're misinformed. Annie Two Arms here says, I remember you speaking to that guy in Paris. It was brilliant how it unfolded. And Witness said, this is about the Effective Education Centre. Oh, wow. Do you think they recruit from there as well? I wouldn't be surprised.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, if anything else, they would be sowing a seed, wouldn't they, for the future?
Yeah.
I'm not aware of, I mean, certainly when I worked there, that wasn't a thing they were doing, no. Because they were children, they were small children that they were teaching. They weren't doing the adult classes when I was there, but like you say, they do now, so you never know.
I imagine it's quite light in their recruitment. I don't expect, if you did a course at the Adult Education Centre, the Effective Education Centre, I don't expect them to pitch Scientology to you. But what they would do is say, okay, here we use study technology, which was developed by L. Ron Hubbard. This is why it's great. And if it works for you at the end of the course, they'll then probably try and put you on a life improvement course or something at St. Hill. I would imagine it's quite a light form of recruitment, but it certainly would happen. Jeremy has a great question. I've starred it. I'll bring it up a little bit later on because I want to get through with this list. Dan and Nat Garsai, we've just done them. Warren and Leanne Mayer. Do you know these people?
No idea.
No, me too. No idea. But it looks like an American.
Does look American.
Based on the suit. Yeah.
Yeah.
David and Becky Fryer, we talked about them earlier.
Yeah.
Really heartbreaking stuff. The fact that they're quadruple humanitarians, meaning they've donated £400,000. And I don't know if Becky's parents are still in, but this very clearly shows that she is still in. And that means she must have disconnected from her family because her family are very definitely SPs.
And also, Alex, you know, if you've got the money to give, again, it's not going to affect you if you give it away. That's fine. But what I would be asking them is to please look for accountability with where the money is going. Yeah. Ask the question, why is it that Sea Org members live in poverty in this day and age? Why is it that they still have to eat beans and rice when all of this money is going up the lines? I just, morally, there's got to be some questions asked about where this money is going to and how it's being used. And don't believe the tripe and the hype.
Yeah, you know? But that might lead you into trouble because you're not allowed to ask why.
And that is such a red flag in itself.
Don't you trust us? Why do you need to know? You know that we're doing good work. That's the sort of thing they would say.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, let's move on. After Dave and Becky Fryer, we have the Gilchrist Wordy family.
Okay, so
another big family here.
That's right. Now, Bob used to work with my mum, and he was also he had links when I was in the GO, I think, too. I don't know if that's Bob on the left there or not. It might well be. It's difficult to tell now. He's older, but that could be Bob. Again, a very well-known ensconced family, the Gilchrists.
Yeah, and the Wordy family as well. You know, Bill Drummond, who is a very well-known face in UK Scientology protesting. He's been doing it for years. Dresses up as a pirate outside St. Hill at the IES event and so on.
Any relation to Vicky Drummond?
I think so. I don't know. We'll have to speak to him about it. But I think his niece is one of the Wordies.
Right.
And they have completely disconnected from him and haven't spoken to him in ages.
Oh, that's really
Sam
sad.
Wordy. Sam Wordy is the niece of Bill Drummond.
Oh.
Yeah.
So sad.
But they're another big famous family in Scientology in the UK. And famous why? Well, because they're treated like royalty because they donate a lot of money.
Yeah.
Shelley and Gunilla Gerber.
Now, definitely recognize that name, Gerber. Definitely.
I do too.
Yeah, I don't recognize the name Gunilla, but I recognize Shelley Gerber name.
I wonder where from. I have to rack my brain because I recognize Gerber as well. But who knows? Andy Robb. Now we had an Andrew Robb earlier, but this is a different Andrew Robb. This is
now he's
Andy
been around
Robb.
a long time, hasn't he?
Yes, he has indeed. In fact, I spoke to a former Scientologist who was at the Manchester org, who told me Andy Robb has been on staff since at least the 90s. He had inheritance some time ago, so I assume that's where the money's come from. Andy is a long-time course supervisor. So this is him at Manchester org, and he ensures the delivery of Scientology courses.
Yeah.
Do you have any memories of him, or did you know him at all?
I don't. I think it's because Nev was an FSM. I think he might well know him.
Yes, he would have had communication.
The
Matheson Pinchin family. Go on, you go first, Danielle.
Well, the only Matheson I know is Craig Matheson, and I don't know if it's the same.
Yes.
From Happy Org.
Yes. It is.
Really?
This isn't him, but it's the same family. This picture is Mark Pinchin, and he was the DSA, Director of Special Affairs for London Org. And he was one of the first people who actually recruited me onto staff, because on the first time I wanted to become a lawyer and I was interested in law. And he obviously in charge of the Office of Special Affairs for the UK, for the London, sorry. And he was like, well, we have a legal section. If you join staff, we have lots of lawsuits, as I'm sure you can imagine. You can come and get some legal experience working for the church and also helping humankind doing it. And I thought, oh, wonderful. That's great. I can do it for 2.5 years and then I can finish that contract and then go and become a lawyer and then come back and continue helping the church. The moment I signed my contract, I was posted in Div 6 as a bookseller and I never did a day in OSA. But Mark Pinchin, he's no longer the Director of Special Affairs, but he still engages in OSA operations. At the IES protest, he drove past filming us. So I was live streaming. I turned the camera around. I said, if you can film me, I'm going to film you. And I'm live streaming to like 2,000 people. And the moment I turned my camera around, he sped off in his car. But Mark Pinchin is probably personally heavily involved in the fair game against me right now because he knows me.
So what's the link between him and Craig?
I believe Mark's wife is a Matheson. So I believe it's married in.
Right, okay. Oh, okay.
I don't know the relation of the wife to Mark.
No, when I was, I went on mission to Happy, and at the time Craig was there, and I think he was the ED at the time, and I think he was engaged or married to, I don't know, a lady called Colleen. But I don't know what happened after that.
Yeah. Witness is asking here, question, what's with the people wearing the armored hand or glove? This is like, I can't remember what it's called, but it's like, it's a symbol of like defiance in the IES and in Scientology. So if you donate money, you have to take a picture wearing the glove to show that you're a humanitarian. It's like one of these Saint Hill knights and of shining armor type thing. It's just a promo thing.
It's an ism.
Yeah, you only get to wear the glove if you've donated a large amount of money.
Oh, Alex, can't wait.
All right, let's move on. The Brinkman family. Do you know any of the Brinkmans?
No.
So Lisa Brinkman is one of the executives at Manchester Org. She was introduced by Aidan Carlson, who was in business with Piers Springthorpe, who is the guy who's now sadly passed away, but he purchased the building in Manchester that is now going to become their ideal org.
Oh, right,
He then is no longer on lines, and he led a few meetings to do disagreements over ideal org. So I don't know if he got declared, but he was definitely pushed out. But what's interesting is Anthony Brinkman, who is photo pictured here, was briefly the executive director of Manchester Org. And I was talking about Becky Fryer earlier. There is a video on YouTube, and this is the one I'm going to be doing a reaction video to, where he speaks to the parents of Becky Fryer on camera to try and calm their nerves and explain why she's not being brainwashed. To try and, turn them around from being suppressive people. He's no longer the executive director, but obviously he's done well for himself and has donated £100,000 to the Ideal Law program.
I just have a question. When I was in, there were, I can't remember what you call it, but the families would organise for someone to kidnap their family member from Scientology. What's it called? Deprogramming.
Yeah.
And then they would, and that did work a few times. Does that still go on?
I don't know. I know for a while that Bonnie Woods was running a escape and leave kind of organization where she would go and pick people up and take them out of the Sea Org if they needed help. But I think she's still willing to help, but I don't think it's as prevalent as it was before. I don't think they'd go as far as kidnapping somebody. Obviously, there's the Aftermath Foundation. If people need help, you can call up and they'll go and pick you up in the middle of night, wherever you are, they'll come and get you.
Yeah, but that's if you want to leave willingly.
Yeah, but the deprogramming stuff, I don't know.
Yeah. They actually physically would go in and get the family member out.
It's hard because you can't help someone that doesn't want to be helped, right?
No, and especially these days, people have got more rights, haven't they, in that regard?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, let's move on here. We've got Alex and Tash Cronin.
Now that just believed. I just don't get it at all. I don't.
The Cronins are a big family in Scientology, and my inside source told me that Alex actually sold his house in order to donate to the Ideologue program here in the UK. And the last update that I received was that he is currently renting in a shared accommodation with other people because he doesn't have any money, because he sold his house so that he could be on this list of Ideologue humanitarians, which is just heartbreaking.
Yeah. It makes me very sad. Like all of us in the Sea Org, or the majority of us, there were the odd few people who had money, but not many people did, or had come from money. And the Cronins definitely didn't have a lot of money. And, you know, I see him running around, little barefoot kids, you know, like all of us, just being neglected. He got into a lot of trouble as a small child. And he's obviously worked hard to be able to get a house of his own. And it just breaks my heart that he would have had to sell that house.
Yeah.
And to be in the position that he's in now. I don't understand it.
And also destroying your financial security for the future and that of your children, because if you sell your house, then that's your children's inheritance, and the financial security and comfort that must give your children, knowing that you have that to fall back on if everything goes wrong, or when you pass away, there's something to hand down the generations. But by selling a house, and your only house, then, you know, what are your children going to inherit? Nothing.
No. And if you had told me that, you know, when he was a young boy, that one day in this day and age he'd own his own house, I would have just been shocked beyond belief. I would have thought completely opposite, that he, you know, and now that he's done it, he obviously worked hard to get it, but he's had to sell it. It's heartbreaking.
All while being told it's for his benefit. He wouldn't have sold that house unwillingly. He would have been coerced into that decision and been told and made to believe that doing so is the best thing for humanity. He's helping the world by selling his house. All of that hard work just goes completely down the drain.
Yeah, and it's interesting how they carried along on a wave of kudos. You know, this gives me, you know, the vain people, that if they you know, it speaks to their vanity that they are being lauded and applauded for doing all of this as well. There are elements of that too. You know, you can tell me, if you'd given a lot of money as a member of the public and they came in at St. Hill, would everybody get, oh wow, you know who's here, look who's here, you know?
Yeah, they would. There'd be an air of like, oh my God, like, it's so-and-so's there, we got to be nice to them and be careful with what we say. And, you know, you're treated like royalty. The red carpet's rolled out.
Yeah. There's a lot of sweetness and light that goes on, isn't there? There's
gaslighting. That's all it is.
Yeah.
If you've got money, you're treated like royalty.
Yeah.
But then you're also then locked in a room until you donate all of that money to the IES or to the Ideologue program or whatever.
Yeah, it's the stuff that people don't see. It's the stuff that's going on behind the scenes that they need to be, these people who are giving the money need to ask the questions about.
Exactly. Ubik Brad here is saying, question, can we do anything to help this guy? It's heartbreaking. The only thing we can do is continue with the protesting, the live streaming, getting the message out there. You know, if you were to bump into Alex Cronin on the street and tell him he's in a cult, he would just walk away. But if you can plant a seed somehow, get him questioning, get him thinking, then that is more likely over time to start, you know, nagging him in his own brain. But how are you going to do that?
Alex, there's another important thing to mention. When one is brought up in the Sea Org from you were born into it, you don't have the capacity, I don't believe, to think logically. You're not allowed to think for yourself. So you are made and led to believe that what you're doing is logically right and correct, and it's the right thing to do. These guys, a lot of these children were not educated.
Yeah.
You know, I was pulled out of school in the middle of my A-levels. I was not allowed to finish my education. My sister was pulled out of her education. She was locked in a room to prevent her going into school for her exams. I was pulled out of my exams.
It's outrageous.
These children, how do they learn to be an adult? How do they learn to think as an adult thinks?
Yeah.
they're indoctrinated in the Scientology regimes.
And also, let's not forget, if your whole family are in, even if you do somehow decide that you want to leave, you've had enough, you're then bound to not do anything about it unless you want to disconnect and lose all contact with your family. So it's really hard, because unless you can convince your whole family to leave, you're done for, and you can't convince them to leave because you're not allowed to have any conversations that are negative or questioning, because you'll get in ethics trouble for it. They'll write reports on you. It's a horrible, vicious cycle.
And also, what I find really sad is the disconnection. You know, these are people that we were fond of. They're people we played games with. They're people we grew up with. They were our brothers and sisters. And I was in Brighton once after I'd left, and Paula, who's Alex's mother, was in a bus stop in Brighton with Alex and his sister. I think she's called Mia. And she saw me and she went into hiding. She crouched down and hid from me in the bus stop.
It's comical. It's actually comical.
Yeah.
The lengths they'll go to, and yet they're meant to confront and shatter suppression and be able to communicate openly and freely with anybody on any subject.
Alex's dad, John, was a lovely guy. He used to drive our buses, you know, but a really intelligent man. He'd had a really interesting background. Ned was just telling me about his history.
Oh, really?
Yeah, no, really interesting man. Yeah.
And that's him. That's Alex Cronin right there.
Yeah.
Andy and Fran Hutton. Anything
now,
to say about these two?
Them, Alex?
Not personally, but I know that Fran was COCLO UK, which is commanding officer of the Continental Liaison Office UK, and they have a son called Jake who is at Flag.
Okay, so I'm pretty sure this is Andy's South African originally, and when I was at Fellow UK, Fran, she was working in Fellow UK as well. I can't remember what her post was, but she's the one who removed me from LRH.com.
No way.
And put me on the RPF.
Why?
Yeah, her name's Frances. She's Scottish originally.
Right.
And so she and I, it's nice to see they're still together again. I mean, again, they're still together. They've been together then for a long time. But this is when the CMO first started to be set up. And a mission had come to basically get rid of everybody. My stats were out the roof when I was working. I was doing really, really well. I'd gone on a really successful mission to Happy, and I'd come back, and then I'd done my OEC FEBC at Flag, and then I'd come back again, and then I was on as LRH.com. And there was a declared SP who had a COMEV, Committee of Evidence, and they were not doing it according to policy. Their agenda was to get rid of this guy, whatever they could, however, in whichever way, regardless of the Committee of Evidence. Doesn't matter what the Committee of Evidence said or did. And I objected because it was against policy. And that's why I was put on the RPF.
Wow. And that's where you can see it start to change, because, you know, ComEvs now it's a kangaroo court. It's there for the purpose of, we want to get rid of this guy, we'll do a ComEv, and it's already decided before you even walk into the room. But it's not meant to be like that as per LRH policy. And it sounds like this is when it started to change. When you were there.
Yeah. They just got rid of everybody on the top echelons, and in 82 it's when the big exit.
Yeah. There is a few comments and questions in the live chat. I am starring them as we're going through, and I will pull them up shortly. Or probably at the end, because we just want to get through this list. Gary and Katie Duxbury. Anything about these guys?
No, I mean, her face looks familiar, but I don't know that name.
No, neither do I, and I couldn't find anything out about them. So if anyone recognizes these two and has anything to share, please get in touch. It'd be interesting to know a bit more about them. The same with Stuart and Lisa Coffey. Do you know these two?
No, but I recognize the surname, but no.
Yeah. How about Emmanuel and Dua Bayer? Or Bayer?
No. Was there a Bayer earlier?
No, not a Bayer.
No. Oh, okay.
But this is a name that I recognize. I don't recognize her. And one of my inside sources tells me, I believe one of Emmanuel's parents is declared. He is ex-Sea Organization and has a brother called Sebastian.
Oh, okay.
There we go. John Swales.
Now that's the name I definitely recognize, but I can't tell you why.
So John Swales, as far as I'm aware, and my source tells me, he is still on staff at Manchester Org. In fact, that picture is taken in the same place as Andy Robb earlier.
Yeah.
John was the supervisor on the Key to Life course and then became the director of training. And our source tells us he's currently training to be an auditor.
Okay.
But he's a Manchester staff member, as far as we have found out.
I didn't know many of them. I definitely don't recognize these two, Shahab and Catherine Emrani.
I believe they are Clearwater Public, so they're American. I believe they are fairly wealthy, but that's about what I could find out about them. Julian Summers.
Now that's the name I recognize again, and I recognize his face, but that's all.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same. I completely recognize him. I've seen him around, but I can't remember. I have to rack my brain for it. What about Sylvia Tomlin?
It's, there's a bell, but that's it.
Yeah. Now, the last one on the list is Yvonne Springthorpe. Now, this is an interesting one because we mentioned Pierce Springthorpe earlier. Pierce Springthorpe passed away in 2009, and he was the guy that purchased the former Duckworth Distillery building in Manchester that's now being renovated to be the next Ideal Org in the UK. It's very questionable about how that purchase actually happened because Pierce Springthorpe and another person purchased the building as private individuals so that the sale could go through, so no one knew it was Scientology. And then they either gifted or sold the building to Scientology, but they purchased it with Scientology money, and then the property has been transferred into Scientology ownership. So there's a big question there about stamp duty and taxes, because you can't just have a building and give it to someone else without there being tax implications. So that's something I'm interested in learning more about. But Yvonne Springthorpe, as far as I'm aware, was married to Pierce, who's now passed away.
Alex, I presume they still have auditors coming in, right?
Yeah. As in financial auditors?
Yeah.
Yeah, so their accounts are all run through an Australian registered charity called Cosrecki.
Yeah.
And this is the big question mark, is they operate exclusively and solely in the UK, but they're registered in Australia. So my suspicion is the Australian authorities go, oh, they operate in the UK, it's their problem. And the UK go, oh, they're an Australian business, it's their problem. And so I have a feeling they're escaping a lot of scrutiny on their financial accounts because of that registration and that loophole. So it's something I'm working on. But their accounts do have to be audited, yes.
Yeah, and I'm sure there'll be an element of, they'll look at what we show you.
Yeah. The accountants will receive the accounts and they'll look at them and they'll go, yeah, it doesn't seem anything wrong with that. Thank you very much. They don't necessarily go in and look through the financial systems in the orgs to see how much money they're making and where it's going. So, well, that's the end of our list. Obviously, there are a large number of empty spaces here that say name here. At first, I thought this was because it was an error, but I thought about it, and no, this is because they want to try and get people to fill the spaces with their names. And it says at the bottom, be the next humanitarian. Contact this number to find out how. So overall, there's like 31, 32 names on here who have all donated $100,000. Some of them, like David and Becky Fryer, have done so 4 times. This represents the wealthiest donors to Scientology's Ideal Org program. Any thoughts, Danielle, having gone through that list?
Well, 1, I'm sad, very sad.
Yeah.
2, I really would like to see them asking some questions and getting some accountability for where their money is going. I don't understand why they aren't. I think they should look at this more forensically and have a look at where is our money going? What is the truth? Why are we being lied to? What else did I want to say about it? No, I don't think I've got anything else at the moment. It might come up in a minute.
I think for me, it's just sad, you know,
Yeah,
all of the, and I know many of these people, and they're all lovely people.
yeah.
Even Mark Pinchin, who is out to get me.
Mm,
There were times we had good times together, and he was a little bit
mm,
scary, but you know,
mm,
you don't want to get on the wrong side of him, but he was a nice person most of the
mm,
time. And
mm,
this is why it's so heartbreaking, because these people are being extorted for money and coercively controlled under
mm,
the guise of helping people. They're not
mm,
helping people. All they're
mm,
doing is financially ruining themselves
mm,
and harming others.
mm.
But that's not what they're told. They're being
No,
lied to. And that's
exactly.
what upsets me, is
Yeah,
these good people that I know very well and we're friends
yeah,
with many of them are being
yeah,
lied to.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And how do you get to them to make them see what the actual truth is? You know.
Mm, exactly. Mrs. J here says it's still not 17 million, which is how much Plymouth Ideal cost. Trust me, it would have been. There's only 31, 32 names on there. But people like Bob and Trish Duggan, Sheila Gaiman have donated millions to the Ideal
Mm,
Org program. Piers
mm,
Springthorpe would have purchased the Manchester building for 3 million. This list doesn't mean these people have only donated 100,000. It means they've
mm,
donated at least 100,000.
mm, mm.
So this does represent likely surplus of 100 million pounds.
I would be interested to know. Sorry, I would be interested to know how much money was being donated, say, in the 90s by these whales compared to how much is being donated today.
Yeah.
Is it going up? Is it going down? You know, yeah, I'd like to know.
And it's hard to track down because I've done a financial analysis of their UK finances and income and expenditure and such, and you can see
Mm,
the graph, but that doesn't truly represent different specific things. I would imagine the Ideal Org strategy is being put through a separate company or through America,
mm,
or there's probably some system in place so that you can't tell exactly what people are donating towards. If Americans are donating towards it, there's no tax exempt. What's the word?
incentive.
Tax incentive. There we go. To donating to a UK charity. So I would imagine they've set up an overseas trust for Bob and Trish Duggan to donate to, so they get the tax write-off, and then the money ends up being spent in the UK somehow. But it warrants further investigation for sure.
Yeah, and just because they donate the money in the UK, as you've said, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to go to the UK.
No. And most of these orgs end up being completed by the IES because they don't raise enough money to actually refurbish the building. So the IES have to step in and donate millions. And
Yeah,
they call it IAS sponsored Ideal Org,
yeah,
which I'm sure means the org has to pay that money back to the IES as a
yeah,
debt.
yeah,
It wouldn't be a grant, it would be a loan.
yeah.
All right, let's get through some of these questions, and then I have one final update at the end before we wrap up. Scientology Audit Ottawa said they did an expose thing at our university against psychiatrists, and students protested hard. Scientologists were yelling at the kids.
Mm,
Wow, there we go. They
mm,
don't mess around, do they?
mm.
My good friend Jeremy, besides brainwashing and money making, what is the purpose of the Scientology courses? Well, life improvement courses at the beginning are pitched as a way of helping you. So if you have financial insecurities, problems in your marriage, or issues communicating, whatever issue you have in your life, Scientology have a course that can supposedly fix that. But the whole point is to recruit you and get you in so that you then spend more money and do the next course. But the whole goal is improving your existence.
Yeah, and I would like to say that some of the basic courses you do at the beginning, like the communications course, did work really well, and they
Of
do work
course.
really well.
Yeah.
But let's also remember that it's not always from L. Ron Hubbard. A lot of it was from other people, you know.
Yeah.
And Nev has told me of some examples of where somebody did something and then LRH took the credit for it. So, you know, that sort of thing people do need to be aware of.
And also a lot of it's common sense, you know, like ARC is in affinity reality communication. Like the idea of if you have a problem with someone, sit down with them and talk to them about it.
Yeah.
Communication is a universal solvent. That makes sense, but that's common sense, right?
Yes.
That's a good
Yes,
way
it
to
is.
resolve an issue is communication. That's not a
Yes.
Scientology principle. That's just a general life advice thing. But
No,
that's the sort of level of information you get in Scientology at the beginning. It's not until you're hundreds of thousands of pounds in that they drop the Xenu story and all of the space opera stuff.
Yeah. When you get into these operating Platon levels is when you start having issues, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm going to leave this or something.
Alrighty, another one here from Scientology Audit Ottawa, who says, when I go out and speak to people, I'm surprised at how many don't know the depths of the bad of Scientology.
Yeah.
It's cognitive dissonance, right?
Yeah.
Like when I was in Scientology, I was in Div 6, so I was public facing. So I dealt with people every single day coming up to me and saying, you're in a cult. You know, you believe in Xenu. Do you blink twice if you want me to help you get out? And I would just think you're absolutely absurd. And that just makes me want to prove to you even more how wrong you are, because Scientology is great and we're all happy and it's lovely. You just have this glaze over your face that you don't even realize you have at the time.
Yeah, I can remember the feeling of having come back from FLAG, having done the organizational executive course and the FLAG executive briefing course, where they really train you to come back and,
get it done. Yeah.
Anyway, but I just remember the feeling of not being me. I wasn't me. I was little Hitler, really, And I remember my sister was in bed and she wasn't very well. And I just remember giving her a really hard time about her, slacking off and being PTS and all of this sort of stuff. And it's like, really, honestly, that was not me.
Yeah. Claire Bear here is saying, which is why mental health awareness is crucial.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right.
Yeah. And this is the thing, to a Scientologist, mental health is all a conspiracy that's made up by the psychs, and they're just trying to control you. So it's about how do you position that to Scientologists without using the term necessarily mental health, or even if you do, just explaining, no, look, it's about your mental well-being. Are you genuinely happy? When you have to choose between eating dinner or getting the bus home, as I once had to do, how do you feel in that moment? Do you really think that that's the best thing for humanity, that you're in that situation?
Yeah. And the irony of Dianetics, the modern science of mental health, really, mental health, are you serious? I remember when I was at FLAG, I'm not going to say who she was, but there was a woman there who had bulimia.
Gosh.
And she had to try. I remember her. I mean, this is gross, but I remember her regurgitating.
Trigger warning.
Yes, trigger warning. Regurgitating her food and swallowing it again and regurgitating it. And then she'd go to the loo. And you can bet your bottom dollar this was not considered an issue. I had issues where I couldn't swallow. I had this condition, it was a mental health issue where I could not swallow. And I know now, since I've had a lot of counseling outside of Scientology with Kelsey Priest, a psychologist or a psychiatrist, that it was linked to not having a voice, not being allowed to be myself and to speak my truth, not being allowed to be me. It's all suppressed.
Yeah.
And it comes out in all sorts of horrible ways.
It's not anywhere near as horrific or as horrible as the story that you just told about yourself or as your friend. But I will never forget the first therapy session that I had, or the first time I spoke to somebody about my Scientology experience, having not been in for 10 years. I told Chris Shelton all about it from start to finish, and he just listened. And the euphoria I felt after it, I felt like a completely different person. And I didn't realize it's because I bottled all of this stuff up for 10 years. And even though I'd left, it was still weighing me down without me realizing. And once I'd got it out there, it felt like a huge weight off my shoulders. And these things affect different people in different ways. Some people, it ends up being eating disorders. Some people, depression, anxiety, all of these things are the result of being in Scientology. That's what Scientology does to people. It doesn't help the planet.
No.
Witness in the US on Netflix. Going Clear is now available. Maybe it is in the UK as well. We can share documentaries and info. Yes, as far as I'm aware, it's also on Netflix here in the UK. I would definitely recommend going to watch it. Spanky Taylor is in that, and and I met her when I was in LA. She's lovely. Scientology audit Ottawa. Question: they have courses on communication, but every time you try to speak to them, they have zero communication skills.
That's so true.
What exactly do they teach, if not how to communicate?
Yeah. And you're okay if you're in, but if woe betide anybody who's out, they will not be talking to you if you're out, and if you're persona non grata.
Well, a Scientologist would look at this and they would answer, well, no, I can communicate, I'm just choosing not to. I don't want to communicate to an SP. So
no.
There's always a justification. Witness here again. Interesting theory, Alex. Loopholes and technicalities are favorites of criminals like the Church of Scientology. People with good hearts and good intentions are being misled and betrayed on a daily basis while being drained of funds and mental health. I couldn't have put it better myself. Very well said. Exactly. Thank you, Witness. All right. Before we wrap up here, I want to share one more piece of news. If I share my screen here, for those of you in and around London, tomorrow, the volunteer ministers will be out in full force on Croydon High Street from 10 a.m. until 5 p.m. That means they'll be offering stress tests, assists, they'll have their yellow jackets on, handing out leaflets, and of course, I'm going to be there too. So if you're in or around Croydon, join me from about noon tomorrow. I've got some flyers to hand out. Where are they? I can show you a couple here. I've got, if Scientology is expanding, why is it $100 million in debt? Which I think is a very valid question. The UK Charity Commission rejected Scientology because it doesn't benefit the public. I think that's quite an interesting point. And I've also got a little quote here. It is dangerous because it is out to capture people, especially children and impressionable young people, and indoctrinate them and brainwash them so they can become unquestioning captives and tools of the cult, withdrawn from ordinary thought, living, and relationships with others. That is a quote from Mr. Justice Leahy, who then became Sir John Leahy, in 1984 in the High Court, when he ruled that Scientology is a dangerous, harmful cult. And yet somehow it's still managing to practice today. So I'll be handing those out. Come and join me from 12 if you're around Croydon. If not, we'll be live streaming, of course. Danielle, thank you so much for your time. Have you got anything you want to add before we wrap up?
No, I don't think so, other than, let's just keep on at it, because we've got to get the word out and help these people. The sad thing is they don't know they need help in some ways. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're just not able to think for themselves. These kids who've been in since forever, these second, third generation children who are now adults, they really believe it. They really believe that they're helping to clear the planet. And they're lovely people. They are lovely people.
Yeah.
They're very sweet, but they're very naive.
That's why it's more disappointing and upsetting, I think, for me, because it's not like all Scientologists are bad people. Yes, there are bad people. There are predators. There are abusers. There are horrible people there. But the majority of Scientologists are genuinely being duped. They're being played. They're being lied to. And my job, I feel now as an activist, isn't to try and change their mind, but to try and open the door for them to find out for themselves, which is what Scientology teaches you. Find out for yourself. Well, look at things, look at your life, and are you really happy if you've had to sell your house and give all of your money to the Ideal Org program? Stats are down. Scientology is shrinking.
And they're not allowed to think for themselves. The problem is that if you have the thought, any kind of negative thought, then you're going in for some, heavy ethics, aren't you?
Exactly.
Oh, God.
Well, we'll keep on doing what we do best. Danielle, you joined me in Sunderland recently when we protested up there. We're going to be doing it tomorrow. We'll have the IES, the two of us.
We had the IES and a stranger.
Oh yeah, and Zena. He's actually been in the chat recently on one of my live streams. It's good to see him pop back.
Excellent.
We'll have the IES protests in October. We're just going to keep on keeping
and
on,
I'll be in
doing what we
Paris in
can.
September, so I'll keep an eye out because I'm going to the Olympics. So I'm going to just keep an eye
Oh,
out for
wow.
these volunteers near the org and see if I can see
They're
them.
going to be distributing 1 million booklets, so apparently they're going to be hard to miss.
Might be on my seat in the stadium. You never know.
Well, Danielle, thank you so much for joining me
You're
for
welcome.
this. And
Pleasure.
thank you, everybody, for watching. If you want to support the channel, buy me a coffee. All that stuff really helps. Like, comment, share, subscribe. It helps get the message out to more people. If you care about this, then you'll do what you can to share this message online. Not just share my video, but share everybody's videos. All of the tweets and the messages and YouTube and all of this is important to get out because the algorithm pushes stuff out to more people that gets more views. So share it far and wide. Comment down below. Engagement drives views, and views means more people potentially helped. So yeah, that's my final thing, really. Other than I'm not fucking about. See you later, guys.
Bye.